I'm actually quite happy to be here today, and you notice my age. I'm happy to be almost anywhere today. But I'm really pleased to be here, but I want to make something really clear before I start, and that is that I'm not here as a trustee of the school board. And I want to make that perfectly clear. And the topic that I'm going to discuss is somewhat controversial, I suppose you could say. But it's meant really to start developing and creating some dialogue in the community about something that, an issue that I feel is very important, and I feel that other people across the country actually feel is very important. And that is the case that is being built for developing one publicly funded education system in the province. My goal today is to talk about some of the issues and to bring up some of the facts that obviously some may agree and some may not agree, but I think that's part of bringing up the dialogue. So first, a brief history. In the province of Ontario, there are currently 4 publicly funded education systems. There's the public system, the Catholic public system, the French public system, and the French Catholic public system. So I can imagine everyone thinking that seems like a lot of confusion for one education system. So, and it is, and believe me, it's not necessary. However, just a little bit of a brief history then is that in Canada, there's only 3 provinces left that actually fund Catholic education, and that is Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Ontario. In Alberta, the courts have decided that the funding of Catholic education in the province, faith-based education, is unconstitutional. But as you can imagine, the school board and the province are appealing that decision. In British Columbia, they have a slightly different system, and there what they do is they fully fund the public system, and then they partially fund all faith-based systems. So there's a lot of differences in the country in the way funding is done for school boards. The British North America Act was 150 years old. That's 150 years. That is the basis for Catholic education in Ontario. It was thought to be necessary at the time that it was enacted to protect the Catholic minority at the time. There was essentially only 2 groups of people in Canada at the time. There was the French Catholic and there was the English Protestant. Other than that, there was very little diversity. So the act actually was also to help prevent the Catholic culture from losing its identity. And so they were also given the right to operate their own faith-based education system. Today, the Catholic system allocated 30% of all of the tax dollars that are paid for education. So in other words, what that means is that if you're a non-Catholic, for every $10 that your taxes are paying, only 7 is going towards your own child. So now move ahead to 1997. At the time, Minister John Snowblin said that he was going to shake up education, and that he did. At the time, there were 124 school boards in the province. When he was finished and the Pure School Boards Act was enacted, it was reduced to 72. So that's the way it is today. You have 31 English, you have 29 Catholic school boards, 4 French, and 8 French Catholic systems. So in my opinion, there are 2 concerns, 2 things that we should consider. The one is it really useful, the use of taxes, to fund 2 parallel systems? And by parallel, I mean that the Catholic system and the public system in Ontario are basically the same. They have the same curriculum, they have the same funding. And as we go into this, you'll see there's other similarities. The second issue that I want to talk about is the whole issue of discrimination. And in the discrimination, I'm referring to the discrimination of all other faith groups. The Catholic system is the only faith group that gets funding. The other is another issue that that I find very important in this community, and that is the policies of the Catholic Board to hire only non-Catholics. That to me is a true discrimination. Incidentally,
did you say they only hire non-Catholics, or
correct,
or hire Catholics?
They will not hire non-Catholics.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. The Charter of Rights and Freedom, it directs the provinces to assign no primacy to any faith group. So the Charter of Rights actually is in opposition to what is going on in the province of Ontario. I just want to emphasize that these are my opinions, and they're here to me to create and encourage a little bit of dialogue. And it shouldn't be misrepresented. I shouldn't be misrepresented. And I don't want to be deemed to be anti-Catholic. As a matter of interest, my two daughters-in-law and my grandchild are Roman Catholic, and she attends a Catholic school. So this is an area that I'm not afraid to stand up and talk about, because I passionately feel that changes have to be made. During a recent interview, and you may have even seen the story in the paper, there was a remark about the potential savings that I had made if the two publicly funded systems were joined. And the representative from the Catholic Board at the time said that they had studied this issue and that there was in fact no money to be saved. There was no savings. And I believe that that was an anticipated type of reaction. In fact, from both boards, the public and the Catholic, the comments are usually made by paid employees, so you expect that that's what they're going to say. And I also believe that it's a matter of drawing a little bit more attention to a growing concern in the public. I believe beyond any doubt that there are a lot of savings to be made, substantial savings. I'm not going to suggest any specific amount, because that wouldn't be right, and you'll see later how I'm getting at where we can find these savings. But I'm basing my research on my 30 years as a trustee and a lot of research that I've done with other groups in the country that are also trying to bring about change in education. For example, the only way really to determine if there's savings at all would be to have a forensic audit. And I believe that's necessary in Ontario. The Ministry of Education have not reviewed governance, and they have not reviewed funding in over 15 years. So it's due. And a forensic audit and a thorough review of education governance would set the stage for finding out once and for all, is there really a basis for funding one publicly funded system? And I believe there is. There have been other researches, and I'll just quote their numbers. They're not my numbers. But the Federation of Urban Neighborhoods, they did a report, and it suggested that by consolidating the two systems, there would be a savings of $1.2 to $1.6 billion. The Fraser Institute suggested in a report that if the BC model was used to fund Ontario's education, that there would be a savings of $849 million to $1.9 billion. So there's consistency. I'm not going to for a moment suggest that these numbers are correct. I don't know. Only a forensic audit would be able to tell. But since I've never seen a report at all that would suggest that there's no savings, there's been no research, and there's been no cost-benefit applied to it. So there's really no evidence to suggest that there's no savings. In fact, common sense would tell you, and I'll give you a list of some of the areas that I think we could do, but common sense would tell anyone that there is savings. And if there's an accountant in the room, I'm sure they would agree. So the following is a list. Now, these are just capital savings. If we were to collapse one of the boards and consolidate, we would be able to save capital savings on, number one, consolidation of underutilized schools. In other words, accommodation reviews would put together schools that have not enough students, and we would have one school rather than two. A disposition of surplus schools. In the growth areas, the need to build one school rather than two. the reduction of vehicles, fleet vehicles, the sale of maintenance sites and declared surplus sites, board office sites and buildings, building sites for future school administrators. So there's a lot of sites that school boards can keep that are well into the future. In fact, in my history on the board, we've sold many properties that we've held for years that we're never going to use. So there's savings in that area. But now for the more important ones, the annual savings, the ongoing savings. And these are just things for people to ponder, to think about. For one, if we reduce 29 school boards in the province, consolidated into one publicly funded system, you would immediately save $2.3 million a year in 231 trustees being eliminated. So that's one huge savings. By reducing 29 boards, you would also reduce 29 directors of education. Now, I've used a very low average, $175,000 a year. I know they're earning, in some cases, $250,000, $275,000 a year. But that would amount to $5,075,000 a year. Those are just two items of where savings could be made. Other areas of annual savings would be a reduction in administrative personnel, duplicated contract services, reduced utility costs from the disposal of surplus sites, ongoing maintenance costs, possible reduction of support staff, ongoing cost of fuel, maintenance, and insurance, reduced salaries, and reduced insurance costs. And this is only a partial list. And I just want to stop for a moment to give you an idea. When we look at transportation, the two school boards have a consortium, but they don't have the same policies. So every year we do a calendar for the following year. And we have 9 professional development days. 2 of them we could not align. So for whatever reason, we were only able to align 7. But the cost of 1 day of not being able to align those calendars amounted to $233,000 in additional transportation costs. So to suggest that there's no savings anywhere available is ludicrous. There are savings, and I think it's just the will to be able to look at it and find them. When we had Janet Ecker and what's his name, Dalton McGuinness, a name you like to forget, but in 1999 the United Nations declared that the Ontario government's fully funding of Roman Catholic schools and denying funding to other faith-based groups was discriminatory. They were directed to cease the practice or else to fund all faith-based groups. Dalton McGuinty and Minister Janet Ecker at the time refused to comply. However, at the same time in the same speech, they both claimed to support inclusion and equity. Both the Ontario and Canadian governments proudly tell the world that Canada, including the provinces and territories, is inclusive with all religions and cultures treated equally. It's just that some are treated more equally than others, I guess. So if you consider the statement of Janet Ecker, she's committed to providing an excellent public education system that is open to all students of religion, culture, or background. Clearly, she was avoiding the issue by making an innocuous political statement and opting for maintaining the status quo. In fact, it's kind of humorous because her comment actually sounded like an endorsement for the position of having one publicly funded system. So while other faith groups in the province are required to pay their own way, the Catholic system enjoys the benefit of full funding. The most obvious example, as I mentioned earlier, of their policies is the hiring of Catholic applicants only. To me, this is unconscionable in a country that wants the world to believe that in a model of cultural diversity and religious equity, that we are all treated the same. In fact, I have suggested that non-Catholics actually go and apply at the Catholic system and then file their complaint with the Human Rights Commission. How many other religions and cultural groups enjoy this benefit? Not many. In fact, in the Toronto Star, there was an opinion that was written that I thought was apropos. It said, "The status quo requires public funds to be used to promote a religious agenda, but only one." What is more troubling is that politicians completely lack the courage to act. I suspect it has more to do with upsetting their financial support at election time. But to me, one of the real questions today is the Catholic faith-based system relevant? To begin with, consider the purpose, operation, and vision of the Catholic system, which uses the 150-year-old British North America Act as its right to exist. No longer able to sustain itself by enrolling Catholic students, the Catholic system appears to be struggling. Facing declining enrollment pressures, it has found it increasingly more difficult to sustain the system. Wavering from the mission of protecting Catholic education for Catholic children, while at the same time recruiting non-Catholics, brings into question the relevance of the system itself. It seems more like a non-Catholic Catholic system. To stop the exodus of Catholic secondary students who do not wish to participate in religion classes, they are now permitted to opt out. What makes this situation any different than a public school board? The issue for both boards is declining enrollment, meaning diminished government grants. Therefore, as Catholic student enrollment continues to decline, Catholic boards across the province now are aggressively recruiting elementary students. In the past, this was a line of respect that was clearly never crossed. Those who defend and advocate for the Catholic system call it a matter of choice. Actually, they would have the same choice as every other faith-based group. Attend a public school or pay to attend a private school, a faith-based Catholic school. The estimated provincial number of non-Catholics enrolled today in the non-Catholic systems stands at approximately 8%. It doesn't sound very much. But in the public school board locally, 970 students have gone to the Catholic system, meaning a reduced revenue of $12 million. An interesting observation that I made during my research was that as the number of non-Catholic students increases in the Catholic system, the number of special education high-needs students is actually declining. But to me, right now, especially in our area here in Kitchener-Waterloo, the shift to one publicly funded system may have already begun. In the Waterloo region, the Catholic system and public systems both share a common purchasing department, a common transportation consortium, a common warehousing facility, common printing facilities, and both receive identical funding. So they're very, very similar. In fact, that's why I call them running as a parallel system. Some call it a shadow system. But what is holding the government back right now from amalgamation? The most popular argument by government is the British North America Act. But correcting these issues is possible. The first step would be to repeal the section of the British North America Act which permits full funding of the faith-based Catholic system. All that is required is a simple resolution. It's Section 43 of the Act allows a change. The second step would be undertake a forensic audit, as I mentioned earlier, a thorough review of education funding and governance in Ontario. Why is the government so afraid of righting a wrong? Or at the very least, prove to the taxpayers beyond any doubt that consolidation would not yield potential savings. The review could also eliminate some of the discrimination. In closing, I submit that in my opinion, the two public systems are in fact operating in parallel with each other with precious few differences. Consolidation would yield an education system with substantial saving of tax dollars, a system that is truly diverse, inclusive, and equitable. And in my opinion, consolidation will happen. It may not be this year or next, but it will happen. In the court of public opinion, support is growing every day, including a significant number of Catholic taxpayers. And I just want to make one thing clear before I sit down. The staffs, the teachers, the curriculum, everything that the school boards do, both school boards, are good things. Every one of the teachers are good teachers, devoted teachers. So this is not to do with the individual personnel. This is strictly a business thing that where, I don't know about you, but with my tax dollars, it's important to me that my tax dollars are used appropriately. And if there is a potential for saving, especially in the billions of dollars, then I'm all for it. Though that money can be used to reduce the provincial debt, or it can be used to reinvest in education, whatever. But